Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about episode 4 of Unsolved Mysteries. I rewatched this episode yesterday and I saw an announcement that they are releasing part 2 of season 1 on October 19th. So we're gonna get 6 more episodes then, which is great news. So episode 4 was about Alonzo Brooks. So Alonzo was a 23-year-old man who lived in Gardner, Kansas with his mother. He had, I believe, 3 sisters and 2 brothers. He had quite a few siblings. And he was one of the only black people in his community. A lot of his friends were white, but according to his friends, that was never an issue. Like, they didn't see it that way, and he was just one of the gang. According to them, Alonzo was like super easy to get along with, would make friends with anyone. And he was like a very polite guy. And according to his mother, he was like, he would always come home, like regardless of where he went or how the night had gone, he would always make sure that he came home. So on April 3rd, 2004, he told his mom that he was going to a party in a nearby town called Racine in Kansas. It was a town that none of his friends or him had ever even heard of. His mom was like, "What is this party for?" And the only thing that he really knew is that it was for a guy who was leaving for military service. And he said, "We're all going there." Like, his mom was like, "Who is we?" And so he said it was him and his friends, Justin, Daniel, and Tyler. And it appeared, so they left for Racine to go to this party, and it appeared that none of them knew anyone at the party. So I don't know how they got to it, how they were invited to it. The house was in the middle of the countryside. There was nothing around it. That Racine itself was a super small town with like a couple of shops, not a lot of houses. It was like small town USA. And again, like, they didn't really know anyone there, but since they said, Alonzo could make friends with anyone, he was seemingly having a good time talking to people, getting along with people. And then at some point during the night, he got into an argument with some guys over the color of his skin. They were making racist comments at him. They were challenging him to fight. They were really like riling him up and trying to get him to throw the first punch. And Racine was also predominantly a white town. I would go as far as to say that it was a solely white town, as far as I understood. Only white people lived there. So, and according to Alonzo's friends, there were quite a few people at that party who had issues with skin color. But they also said that it didn't really seem to faze Alonzo. Once the argument was over, he went back to having fun. He wasn't the type of guy who let something like this get to him. And there was no animosity. They said that there wasn't a charged atmosphere, and that for as far as they could tell, everyone continued to have a really good time. Now, so one of his friends said that race wasn't an issue to their group of friends, but that he was the only black man at the party. I tried to look up on this case a little bit afterwards and read that there were 3 black people at the party. But even according to the episode, it sounded like he was the only one, so keep that in mind. So, two of his friends, Daniel and Tyler, left the party before the others did. One of them left. He said he had heard of another party somewhere and decided to leave. He hugged Alonso goodbye, said that he seemed to be having a good time. And then the other friend left early around 11. Didn't really say where he was going, just that he left. And also that he said goodbye to Alonso and that he seemed to be having a good time. Now, Justin was the friend who had given Alonso a ride to the party. At some point in the night, he ran out of cigarettes. He wanted to borrow one from Alonso, but he was also on his last one, so Justin said, you know what, I'm going to run out and get us some cigarettes. But when driving out of the driveway, he should have gone left, but he went right, and he got horribly lost. He got stuck on some gravel roads. He was 30 minutes away in the wrong direction, and he called another friend of his at the party called Adam and said, you know what, I'm not going to make it back. He said, could you tell Alonso that I won't get there, and could you please give him a ride home? Alonso heard this, that Justin was not coming back, but Adam never gave him a ride home, and it is the only, Adam was the one that they didn't interview for this episode. The only thing that Justin could say is that Adam apparently thought that Alonso had already gone home because he couldn't find him at the party anymore, so he left. I am enraged at this piece, okay? I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you're male or female. You do not leave your friends behind at a party. When I go to the pub with my friends in Ireland, we're all well into our 30s. If I leave early, at least one of them will walk me to the taxi rank and make sure I get in a taxi safe. And I will always have to text someone once I've gotten home so they can let everyone else know. And we do that for everyone. Nobody leaves alone, and nobody stays behind alone. And that's Ireland, pretty safe place. So I just, yes, they were in their 20s. Yes, they were men. Not an excuse. You do not leave your friends behind. Now, Justin, the guy who was supposed to give him a ride, feels extremely guilty, and I don't question that, and ultimately it's not their fault what happened to him. It's whoever did it, whose fault it is. But I just find it, I'm not gonna lie, I find it a little bit sketchy. And I also just find it unacceptable that none of them made sure he got home. And I don't know about you if you watched this episode, but I felt like some of his friends were a little bit sketchy. I almost felt like they were hiding something, not that they did anything to him, but that they might know who did and didn't want to say it. I just felt like, I don't know, I felt like they weren't telling everything, but it is 16 years ago. I mean, maybe that's just, how they tell the story these days, but I felt that there was something off. And Alonso's mother said the same thing even now. She's like, I don't understand why nobody gave him a ride home. It sounded to me like she didn't even really know them that well, because she had to ask Alonso who he was going with. And even in her interview now, I had the impression that she didn't really know his friends or know who they were that well, which I found interesting. So the next day, Alonso's mother got a call. She doesn't say who called her, but she just got a call asking if Alonso was home. And she said, well, of course he is, because he always came home. So she checked his room, but his bed had not been slept in. She called for him. Maybe he was down in the basement, but he wasn't anywhere in the house. So she said, no, he's not home. And the person said, well, maybe he stayed over with one of his friends. I'm guessing it was one of his friends that called. And And his mother said no, he would not stay over at anyone else's. That's just not him. He would come home. So they started calling all the friends that he went to the party with. None of them had seen him since that night. So a few friends headed back to that house to see if they could find Alonso. Now all they found were his boots and his hat. He had a beanie that he wore that was like a signature mark of his. Now one boot and the hat were across the street from the farmhouse where the party was. The other boot was a little down the road, but on the same side as where the house was. It almost looked as though someone had thrown them out of a car as they were driving by. Alonso's family went down to Lacine to look for him, but they didn't find anything, and the sheriff's office of Lacine was also not happy to see them there. He was like, we are looking for him, we're taking care of this, like, you don't have to concern yourself with it. And incidentally, they also gave his mom the spiel of you have to wait 48 hours to report him missing, which is not a thing, but you hear that a lot in these cases. So on April 7th, the case was turned over to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. They did an extensive search for Alonso. There was a creek running along the farmhouse. They searched the entire creek bed and didn't find anything. Now, because this was potentially a hate crime, the FBI also got involved on April 10th. On April 12th, the underwater rescue and dive team thoroughly searched the creek. They searched the bottom of the creek. Didn't find anything. They used cadaver dogs to search all of the creek bed and all the woods around it. Didn't find anything. On May 1st, so 27 days later, the sheriff's office finally gave his family permission to conduct their own search. They were like, we've searched everything. We didn't find anything. If you want to search the area, be my guest. So they did. They brought in friends. It was a fairly big group of people that searched. And within 30 minutes, they found Alonso. He was actually lying on a dry patch of the creek. So I'm not, because they showed a picture of it. I'm not sure whether it was the creek bed that had dried up or whether it was like this side of the creek. But he was found within 30 minutes, which begs the question, why wasn't he found in the 27 days before? So police claim that they searched that spot and that he wasn't there. So either the body was moved there, or it could be that he got stuck in the water of the creek, maybe behind some branches or something, and that when the creek drained or filled, that he got loosened and that his body got carried over to that spot over the course of those 27 days. But that still makes no sense because they searched the bottom of the creek with a dive team and did not find him. Also, Alonso's mother showed all the possessions that he had on him that night, and not a single one looked like it had been touched by water. He had he had a wallet, he had a ring, he had actual papers on him that were in perfect condition, not consistent with him being in the water for days. He also didn't look bloated, indicating that he wouldn't have been in water for that many days. However, the coroner, he didn't find any broken bones or gunshot wounds or stab wounds, but he said that all the soft tissue around his neck, actually probably maybe all his soft tissue, but specifically around the neck, was gone, had been eaten by animals, and so he could not determine whether Alonso had been strangled or not. So his cause of death is undetermined. The coroner also said that it's very unlikely that his body was moved there because it was a very overgrown area, would have been very difficult to walk through, specifically with a body. Now, if you're very determined, you could do that, but he doesn't think anyone would have gone through that trouble. But I find it interesting that he's kind of contradicting the police, because according to the coroner, the body would have been there in that spot for 27 days, and police was like, no, we definitely searched that spot and it was not there. And you know what? I can't imagine that they would have missed him, because his family found him within 30 minutes. So it's not like he was that well hidden that they could have overlooked him. He was pretty out in the open. Now his brother believes that because his body wasn't really that decomposed, it looked pretty well preserved, that he was kept in some sort of fridge or freezer, and that he was placed in that spot maybe 1 or 2 days before they found him. Now that would have been my first guess, but the fact that his soft tissue had been eaten by animals would indicate that he was kept out in the open somewhere. I can't imagine that it had all been eaten within a matter of a couple of days. But maybe it had, I don't know. The coroner said that his body looked consistent with a body that had been in a creek for 30 days, but I disagree. I didn't see an actual picture of the body, but every single person who found him said that it did not look like he had been in water, and again, his possessions really didn't look like they had been in water. So that is kind of what there is in this case. So his cause of death was undetermined. They don't know where his body was for 27 days before they found it, because they are adamant that it was not there when they searched. They sent a letter to Alonso's brother saying that they concluded the investigation into his death and they could not link it to any crime, and with that they were closing the investigation. So there's not a lot known about what sort of investigation they conducted. I'm sure they interviewed the people at the party, but who knows? According to some other articles, they did a polygraph on some people, and some other people lawyered up and did not want to do a polygraph. So it kind of begs the question why they didn't want to and why they weren't forced to. Well, I don't know if you can force someone. I think it's actually always voluntary, but it's like, why didn't you want to? His brother also said when they went back to that farmhouse the next day, it was spotless. It wasn't even, so they interviewed the owner. He rented it out for the party, as far as I understand. It was an empty house, and you couldn't even tell that there had been a party the night before. It was spotless. I did search for it, there is an update in this case, in that in July of this year, they exhumed Alonso's body to do another autopsy on it, but I have not been able to find if they have released any outcome on that. I don't think they have. It was reopened in 2019, his case, but I do think that's because Unsolved Mysteries was filming in 2019, and I think it kind of made them reopen the case. And in June of this year, the FBI offered a $100,000 reward for anyone with information to come forward. So I really, really hope that this episode can solve this. I mean, there is very little doubt in my mind that this was a hate crime. I don't see any other thing. There's a lot of theories out on the internet. Some people think that he decided to go for a midnight swim and drowned. But I mean, why would he? It was also a creek. It wasn't like a lake or a river, or, it was a creek. I don't think you really go swimming in a creek. There are some people who believe that he was kept in a freezer. There are other people who believe that he was washed up. Some people believe that it was a hate crime. Others believe that his friends did it. Like, and his family said that the internet is crazy with people spewing all these thoughts about it. And they said we don't even really pay attention to it anymore. We just want to know what actually happened. I do believe it was a hate crime purely for the fact that he had gotten into an argument earlier that night about the color of his skin, and his friends even said that there were multiple people at that party who were racist, and they do claim that there was no charged atmosphere when they left, that everyone was having a great time at the party. But I don't think you just forget something like that happened. And again, where the hell were his friends? This is confusing to me. Again, Justin seemed genuinely like he felt guilty. He said that if he had just gone back, he could have either avoided all of this and taken Alonzo home, or he could have fought off some guys with Alonzo. He believes, some of his family believe as well, that he was most likely attacked by a couple of guys, and that he was overpowered because Alonzo was a big guy, a very athletic guy, so it would have been hard for one person to overpower him. However, he had no broken bones and didn't really show any signs of being beaten. But it had been 27 days, so who knows? Doesn't necessarily have to have been beaten anyway, they could have overpowered him any other way. And again, I don't blame what happened on the friends, but I do find it appalling that they all left him behind. If I was giving my friend a ride and I said, hey, I'm gonna go get us some cigarettes, which is moot because we don't smoke, but if I had run out and gone to get us cigarettes and I would have driven in the wrong direction, you can be damn sure I would drive back in the right direction to go get her. I would not leave my friend behind. I can only imagine that he was 30. Oh my God, siren. I don't know if you can hear that, sorry. I can only imagine that he had driven 30 minutes into the direction of his house and just decided it was closer to go home than to go back to the party. Because why else wouldn't you just drive back? But more than that, I don't understand their friend Adam. As I understand it, he didn't leave with them, but he was a common friend that they had at the party who said he would bring Alonzo home, and his excuse was, I thought he already left. It was a house party. How long would it have taken you to actually look through the house to see if you could properly find him? It was such a vague explanation. Again, they didn't interview him, but Justin was like, that's all I got, is that it was some kind of vague, I thought he had already gone home type thing. Some people actually sprouted the theory that maybe Alonzo decided to walk home and took off his shoes. But I don't know why you would take off your shoes to walk home. And also, he had hurt his ankle a few days before, and he would not be able to walk that far without support. Like, Lacine was a good bit away. I think it was like a 20 or 30 minute drive away. It would have taken him hours to walk home without shoes. I highly doubt that. And that's another thing. If he had decided to go swimming in the middle of the night, why would he take his shoes and his hat off that far away from the creek. Like, the creek was right by the house, but his stuff was found closer to the house than to the creek, as far as I know. And they weren't found in the same place. Like, one shoe here, another shoe way over there. That's not, like, it just makes no sense. I cannot, under any circumstance, see how this could be an accidental death. It makes no sense. It had to have been a third party. Like, it had to have been foul play, and the most obvious theory is that it was racially motivated. And I'm really glad that they covered this case, because I get a lot of questions on why don't I cover more cases on my channel of people of color, and it is simply because it's really hard to find. There's not a lot of those cases being reported on, and if they are, there's very little information out there. So I'm really happy that they brought this to light, and that hopefully this can be solved, because it just doesn't happen enough. So yeah, that's all there is in this case. Let me know what you think, and thank you as always so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.